Kia ora, Internet!
Hello and welcome to the Sky There Games podcast.
So, we're back, and what's new in the world of Skybear games and games in general?
Things are just, things are coming along.
Yeah, all our projects we've been finding have been going a little bit slower now that we're not in lockdown anymore.
They were going slowly in lockdown too.
They were going slowly in lockdown because we had a toddler around all the time, and now we don't have a toddler around, but we also have full-time work again, so
yeah,
it is what it is.
Yeah, it's coming along. There's going to be, I estimate around the start of January, I'll be able to send out a beta test build to my backers for Her Gentle Highness, so that's nice. That's progress. And I did a NaNoWriMo novel.
That's cool.
I'm still doing a NaNoWriMo novel.
I've had an idea for a novel, just post NaNoWriMo, but I have not had any time to actually do anything with it.
But you've also been spending a lot of your spare time on the topic that we're going to talk about tonight, so...
Well, not lately, because what's spare time?
I see. Every time you edit things, I get updates on my Gmail account saying that you've updated it.
Yeah.
Which, how do I turn that off? I get a lot of emails.
So, we have talked about a lot of different role-playing settings so far during this podcast. And we realised that we haven't actually talked about the most important setting of all to us, which is our own one.
Yeah, and we've had friends ask, oh yeah, that thing that you're always talking about, what's the deal with that? How do I get into it? What's the deal?
So
here we are.
This time we're going to talk about Ruins of Tyrania. Suddenly I want to see a Muppet Pigs in Space style show set in Dragons of Tyrania. So, Dragons of Tyrania is our home D&D setting, and it kicked off in, I want to say 2014?
It's either 2014 or 2015.
I want to say it was right at the end of 2014.
I think you're right.
So, what happened was that at the time, I was working at a game store, which will remain nameless, and the game store didn't want to purchase any of the Adventurers League adventures.
Is that how this started?
Yeah, that's how this started. They were too cheap to buy Adventurer League adventures once they went from being free to having a cost. And all the players at the store had played all the ones we had already.
Wow.
I was sort of in charge of the role-playing nights, and so it was up to me to come up with a solution for something that we could run in-store that wouldn't cost management anything, that the players would like and appreciate. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if in Adventurers League the idea is that there's a sort of ongoing storyline, there's recurring characters, you get to influence what's going on. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool to have something like that, but that's specifically for our store, where we could have multiple campaigns going in the same world, a persistent setting, people could move their characters from table to table as they saw fit, as was needed based on numbers coming in. Something unique to us. So I did a survey. And I asked the players, this is what I'm thinking about. And they said, yeah, that sounds really cool. And I got them to fill in some setting ideas. And I remember the sorts of things I was interested in is what sort of technology level are you interested in? What sort of time period in history? And what sort of place are you interested in? And I was really hoping that they would come up with something funky. And they didn't, of course. They came up with pretty basic. That they wanted something that was medieval and European. But I wanted something a little bit different. Not a lot different, obviously, since they said medieval European. I wanted something that was a bit unique. That would stand out as not just being the sort of generic D&D 5th edition experience that you get in the Forgotten Realms. So we went out for dinner, and we chatted through some ideas, and we came up with the idea of a game that's inspired by Italy and the Italian Renaissance, which is very iconic, very recognizable. One of the big ideas I wanted is I wanted something where I could just say the high concept to people and they would basically get what was going on instantly. I think for an Adventurers League style thing, that sort of instant accessibility is really important.
Totally.
But having an Italian-themed game rather than the normal sort of English War of the Roses sort of feel that you get would be a bit unique. And having a game that was not fully like Enlightenment era, but Renaissance, the early Renaissance, would give it just a little thing of slightly different technology, slightly different culture and language, and make it really unique.
Yeah, the phrase that I remember specifically being like the selling point for me was, it's the Italian Renaissance, but the dukes and princes are dragons.
I can't remember when we came up with the idea of it being dragons.
Well, I know that
It was
from early on we used to just call the setting Dragon Princes.
Dragon Princes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was one of the first original things that we came up with, was that this would be a world where you would have different city-states, that they would all be competing with each other for prestige and power and influence, and that all of them would be ruled by the different types of dragons that you find in the monster manual. So you'd have one city has got all the blue dragons, one city has all the red dragons, and one has the silver dragons, and so on. And that the players themselves would be mercenaries, which is of course a big thing for the Italian Renaissance, that they didn't have state armies. Generally they had mercenaries that they hired instead. So that the players would be mercenaries who could get hired by the different cities to go on different missions. And I remember another idea we had very early on was that the players would also be humanists.
Yeah.
So in the Renaissance, humanism was a really big idea, and it was all about emphasizing the human over the divine or the religious. The importance of us here, now, humans rather than God being the measure of all things. And the sort of intellectual flourishing that came from that. But in a world where dragons ruled everything, humanism would mean something completely different. And so now what we had was a sort of rebel alliance.
Yeah.
Trying to liberate the world from the dragons. We ran the idea for the players, and they loved it. We had a really successful campaign.
Yeah, it was great.
We actually had another GM join in as well.
Oh, yeah.
Who did a sort of a side quest. I remember he dropped out because he got busy with other commitments. But he ran a shorter adventure while I ran the story of this mercenary company. And it was a very co-constructivist campaign, or as much as a store campaign with rotating players can be. But they got to come up with ideas about who their captain was, who was the leader of the mercenary company, what their company was called. We also implemented a house rule about using inspiration sort of as a story points.
That's right.
To represent how they were meant to be really skilled mercenaries who could improvise. That, they weren't an army, but they were as good as an army because of what they could do and what they could bring to the table. And so the players really liked the sense of power and agency of exploring this world and being able to create details for it and tying into the lore in a way that they didn't get to do in the Forgotten Realms Adventurers League.
Yeah.
The campaign got cut short because I stopped working at the store. But we did manage to wrap up all the plot threads really quickly at the end and end with a giant battle of all of them versus a dragon.
Yeah.
Which is great fun.
It was lit.
You were a player in that game, weren't you?
I was Francesca, and I was a monk?
Yeah, you were a monk.
Yeah, but monks are super cool in this setting. Should I explain what monks are, or should we leave
one
that
of the
until
things
later?
that we did for the initial sort of concept was we came up with ideas about what all the different races were and all the different classes and how they would fit into the setting. And so a lot of the things that wouldn't traditionally fit, we would twist. And also I made sure to have pre-generated characters for every class in D&D. And I know a lot of the players that we'd got did use the pre-gens and then just modified them to make them their own, but they were really happy with how fresh and original some of them felt.
Yeah.
So like the monk, for example.
Yeah, the monks are from, rather than being from an Eastern, Asian tradition of martial arts, we went, well, okay, this is Italy. Italy was hugely inspired by Greece. So let's take ancient Greek wrestling as the starting point for the monk class. So these are wrestling monks and philosopher monks.
And we found that was really cool.
Yeah.
Having the way of the elements rather than being an airbending monk, being an Aristotelian monk.
Yeah.
Having the traditional kung fu monk now being a grappler and a boxer. who will also ask you questions about the nature of reality and the immortality of the soul as they are putting you into a chokehold.
Yeah, then it evolved into like you can basically go stay at the YMCA in a city in Tyrania, and you are expected to be able to argue your philosophical beliefs whilst wrestling.
Another one that I was really proud of was our Warlocks, who I decided I didn't want to have Cthulhu-style entities, because I think they're kind of overdone.
Yeah.
And I think that the more overdone they are, the less scary they become, which is sort of undermines the whole point of them. So we made the equivalent be powered by the Black Death. And so the bacteria were your patron if you were a warlock who wanted to take that pact. And that was another thing that I remember the pre-gen character we had was a plague doctor who'd gotten infected and then found that they had all these weird powers and had weird voices in their head as a result once they'd gotten better. And that was another character that one of the players picked up and then really enjoyed.
Super cool concept, yeah.
Anyway, so 2014 it started, 2015 it was done. Finished the campaign, wrapped it up with a nice big story hook for the future, but as I left that and started training to become a librarian, I put all of this behind me. Except I remember you said you kept on asking me to go back to this world.
Yeah, I really liked it, and I wanted to, see you make something out of it, like even just like a little setting booklet or something.
Yeah, we could see that we had something that was quite cool. And particularly the more we developed it, well, the development really came later, because in addition to becoming a librarian, I also started doing some more theatre.
Yeah, that's right.
And at the theatre we had a number of people who said, oh, Dungeons and Dragons, I've heard of that, what's that like? And so we said, oh yeah, we'll run a game for you. I gave them a whole lot of different ideas of different settings that we could do. You know, which one of these ideas do you like? Which one of these things do you want to try out? And overwhelmingly, they said, we like the idea of this Italian thing you've got.
It's amazing. I didn't realise there was like 2 years in between.
Yeah, there was a big gap in there where I didn't do any work on it. And so I pulled out my folder and I got all my notes and we started running another game. And in this one, we worked with the players and we decided this one was going to be set in our version of Venice, where the Red Dragons ruled. Once again, people really enjoyed the setting and the world. So the players decided that they were going to be the children of a noble family whose patriarch, their father, had called them all back because he was dying and he wanted to confess something to them on his deathbed. But just as he was about to confess, their house got attacked. It started sinking into the lagoon. Merfolk assassins started going after them, and their father got killed before he could say what it was he was going to confess. And so it started this whole big mystery investigation, lots of intrigue, where they were trying to find out what their father had done and why people were trying to kill him and kill them.
Yeah. Oh, it was rad.
It was really fun because I came up with my new way of how to GM with that, of coming up with an initial premise, knowing where the endpoint was, and just making stuff up to get from A to B, giving the players lots of options about, what do you want to do next? Do you want to do this next? Do you want to do that next? Do you want to do that? And whenever they said something was unimportant, I'd drop it. Not a plot point. Doesn't matter. And whenever something showed up that was really important, okay, that's really critical to the plot. So, as a result, it wound up what was supposed to just be a little sort of background colour thing that was going on with the dragon in charge of the city going mad and a sort of rebellion against him, turned into the main plot as we reenacted Les Mis on the streets and erected barricades and...
I completely forgot that wasn't supposed to be, like, integral to the plot.
No, that was just a thing that happened in the background.
The way that it played out, though, it felt like it was perfectly intertwined, the personal and the city-wide plots just all coming together. It's, in a way, it's sort of like Star Wars.
I'm really quite proud of that game.
You
think
should
I really knocked it out of the park.
It's epic.
Also, supporting characters who were supposed to just be background colour for one scene, someone they just need to get one piece of information from, wound up becoming the most important character in the entire campaign.
Yep.
As the players noticed every time that they focused on him, he became more important, and so they doubled down and decided that Antonio, the dockyard worker, would be the most important person.
Saint Antonio.
Yeah, he wound up becoming Saint Antonio and saving the day in the end.
Heck yeah.
It was a really cool game.
It was so cool.
But possibly more important than it, was that at the same time, I realized that if I was going to run this for all of you, I needed to know much more about the world than what I had. So I started writing a blog.
That's right, yeah.
And the whole idea was meant to be that the players did not need to look at the blog, they didn't need to refer to it, it was not important for them, but they could if they wanted to. There would be very minor mechanical rewards for them if they wanted to contribute anything to the blog, but really it was just a chance for me to get to know more about the world and flesh things out. And the idea I'd had was that, like, once every week, once a fortnight, I would write something and put it up on the blog. Turned into more like once a day.
That's right, you got really into
I
it.
got really into it. I started really digging into this world. Because the more I dug into it, the cooler it became. And as an ex-history teacher, I wanted to do the research. So I got out lots of library books. I started reading all about Renaissance history, Italian history, Venetian history. And the more I read, the more I got that inspired me. I remember one of my bits of inspiration, what was supposed to be the main plot of the campaign, came from me reading about Venetian history. The Venetians thought that they were so sinful a society that they were at risk of God smiting them like they were the new Sodom or Gomorrah. And I thought, that's so cool. That's what the campaign is about.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I'm impressed by the amount of research you've done. It's intense.
I also read as many of the historical sources from the time, like the Decameron.
Dante,
the Divine Comedy. Haven't managed to get through the last one yet.
Paradiso.
Because
that's where it gets boring. Well, no, Purgatorio is boring, isn't it?
Yeah, Purgatorio wasn't that bad, but like
Inferno
is where it's at.
Yeah.
There's a reason why everybody knows Inferno and not the other two parts, because Inferno is just really good.
Yeah.
And also really nasty, but I think people like a bit of nasty.
Yeah.
Purgatorio is pretty nasty too. But yeah, I read lots of that. I read lots of historical fiction as well, and to see what other people have been doing with the setting.
You found a few gems there, eh? Like Name of the Rose.
Name of the Rose was wonderful.
Is it Anger of Angels?
Yeah, the book that, for me, when I read it, I was like, this is what this world is all about. You could just change a couple of the names and say that it was a tie-in novel, practically. You also have to say that one character was a dragon, but that's it. The Anger of Angels by Cheryl Jordan, who's a New Zealand young adult writer. She's very highly regarded here. Anger of Angels is, her second to latest book? And it really sums up what I wanted to do with Tyrania. So some of the other things that started coming out with Tyrania at this point, as I started really digging into it, some of the more philosophical ideas were that it would be a campaign setting where the players' choices would matter. That's a philosophy that I got when I was playing Pendragon, and Pendragon really incentivizes you to make moral choices about what's important to you. But of course, in Pendragon, there's a limit to how far those choices can go unless you're willing to throw out all the meta plot. Whereas with Tyrania, I had this feeling that there was a giant meta plot event happening, but that it wasn't going to be one that I was going to write myself, that it was going to be one that would emerge over the course of the games. And another thing I decided to do, which was really cool, that I've really enjoyed, I'm not sure that my players have as much, you have, is that all of my campaigns, as I've started doing them, have callbacks and tie-ins to previous games. And so people who played more than one game get to see, that thing that I did back, years ago in that game, that's now feeding forward to pay into what's happening now. And it also means it establishes real stakes for all the games going forward, even for people who don't play in a subsequent campaign.
Yeah.
Whatever you choose will change the world.
Yeah.
It will matter.
It's pretty good like that.
I decided, so with that, the idea of, I don't want to say moral ambiguity, but the idea of relative morality. Yeah. So you have all the different good dragons and the evil dragons, but that each of these dragons has a very different idea about what it means to be good or evil. And that in practice, the evil blue dragons might be considered to be allies, whereas the lawful good bronze dragons are one of our primary antagonists in the setting.
Absolutely.
Because they've got different ideas about what does it mean to be lawful and good, and that might not be the same as what you think is lawful and good. But that's okay, and they are all, lawful and good
Yeah.
in their mind with justification. And I think that's something that added a lot of depth as well to it.
Big time. So what came next after... Oh, I remember that during Carnival, you wrote your first sort of, well, I say one-off. It became more than a one-off. Death of the Artist.
Yeah, so this is where after the Carnival campaign, this was where I was like, oh, okay, I've always wanted to have my own D&D setting, and this is it. This is my world that I'm really developing. And so when more people, like friends at work, started saying, oh, D&D, I've heard of that, can I try it out? I started writing more adventures. And the idea was always that it was short, like one-off adventures, or short campaigns that always would have this sort of feed forward. So, yeah, we started writing more and more content. We started doing more adventures. We had Death of an Artist, which is a murder mystery adventure.
Which, even though being the first one-off or, like, short thing that we wrote, isn't the first one that we published. Because the following year we did Double Cross.
We'll get to that one.
Yeah, carry on.
Yeah, we had The Ruins of Aromia, which is the game that I'm about to conclude. Finally, after all this time, the lockdowns kind of killed that one, or at least delayed it a lot. And what became apparent was that I wanted to write this up. I want to get this and to publish it in some format. The blog was getting really big at this point. In fact, actually, this is something I've always found slightly double-edged sword. One of the ideas is meant to be that Tyrania is a really accessible setting that you can just tell people, Italian Renaissance, but the princes are dragons. And that's all you need to know. But now we're at a point where it's like, also, all these settings are fleshed out, and here's all the history, and here's how the religion works, and here's, all of this stuff, and here's how the angels work, and the demons work, and the fairies, and the elementals, and this, and that, and the other. And I don't know, there's always been this line I've been trying to work with about giving detail, but not giving too much detail. That's difficult.
You see, I appreciate how fleshed out this is now because I intend... Well, okay, I should probably mention this after we say that the current state of where it's at. So we've written and published one small adventure.
Yeah.
We've got two other small adventures on the way, which is Death of an Artist and The House of Della Squama. And the current thought, rather than a big textbook-style D&D tome, is to publish as zines with digestible chunks of setting info. As long as you're planning a player's guide, right?
Yeah. So in 2020, when COVID forced us all into lockdown, suddenly I found myself at home with a bit more spare time on my hands than I'd had before. And at that point, our son was still quite young. He was still sleeping quite a lot. And so I had a bit of spare time. And you said, why don't you write this all up? I had all this blog that was basically, at this point, like a zero draft. And so I sat down and I started doing... I think my initial goal was 500 words a day, and that really quickly turned into 1,000 words a day, 2,000 words a day, 3,000 words a day. And I started churning out this really extensive first draft.
Yeah.
Now, I remember the original goal was that I should try and have it ready for kickstarting as a full D&D hardback coffee table book by the end of the year, and we decided that it wasn't feasible when the lockdown ended.
Well, also, we had done a number of things by then that sort of made us realise, like, we took it to Armageddon. The plan was still to kickstart it back then, but seeing how hard it was to market a number of things, like market even this podcast, the listenership of this podcast is very limited. The playership of my computer games is very limited. Marketing is hard. We're not that great at it, but we have a following who really appreciate what we put out. So over time, as we sort of got past the ego
initially I realized that the reason I wanted to publish it really is for me. I want a copy to put on my shelf.
Sure.
I don't really care about international recognition or success in the field. I have a very good career that I'm following at the moment. But, I want this for me.
Yeah,
and that's a fair reason. So...
And I mean, if the smaller zines not so much take off, but, you know, if one day there's enough to sort of collect it together and enough of a following, kickstarting a tome is still like a possibility. But what is actually far more digestible and what people actually want to purchase from third-party D&D writers is adventures.
Yeah.
And supplements and stuff.
Modular things that can get dropped down.
Exactly. So we have actually been picked up a little bit on itch.io and on Drive-Thru RPG. Because that's what we're offering.
We should probably actually talk about what we did at Armageddon, because that was a really
Well, yeah,
big
we'll get up to that
thing.
part, because you just finished about the first lockdown, so that was like May 2020. So I guess the next thing we did was prepare for Armageddon.
Yes.
We prepared Double Cross.
So when we realised that we weren't going to have the whole book ready to go for Armageddon, we decided to just do an introductory guide and have that ready for Armageddon.
Yeah.
And then we thought, okay, so if we're going to run a table, if we're going to have this promotion at Armageddon, we need something special.
Yeah.
And it's always been a hallmark of mine that when I come up with a project idea, I think big.
He's extra.
I think extra. So I thought, okay, the idea of Tyrania is that you have these event campaigns.
Yeah, huge factional
that
things going on.
have importance and have consequences. So what if, instead of doing your basic learn how to play D&D, here is a 1-hour adventure in which you go punch goblins in a sewer. What if instead of that we had something that was a little bit bigger, a little bit more audience participation, a little bit more actually showing what makes Tyrania unique? So we came up with the Siege of Medellin, which is possibly the craziest thing we've ever done.
Yeah.
I mean, we've done
that whole Armageddon
professional
thing was...
theatre was pretty crazy, but this was this was pretty crazy too.
This didn't have as much go wrong with it.
No, but at the same time, it also didn't have as much go right with it.
That's true.
So, Siege of Medelano was a 4-day campaign. And the idea was that we would have 2 different adventures every single day of Armageddon. So we were encouraging people to come back from day to day to check on us to see what was going on. It was the war between 2 factions, and to make that point about the different moral relativism, if that's the word that I want, the different moral viewpoints. It was a war between the lawful good bronze dragons and the lawful good silver dragons. Who completely could not agree about what it meant to be lawful and good.
It was great.
Every adventure had a choice that the players had to make, and the results of the choices that the players made, along with the points that they earned from in general engagement with us.
Yeah, people could come and they could just straight up vote, and they'd get a free sticker for the side that they voted for. They could get extra votes if they did things like follow us on social media, buy something, recruit a friend.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had this tally going all weekend.
Yeah. And so the results every day by day, for the tally and for the majority choice that had been made during the adventures, would then affect the adventure for the next day.
Yeah.
So it was this hellishly complicated little flow chart where if this, then that, but if that happened here, then this changed over here. With, like I said, 4 different adventures every day. With a giant map where we put little stickers on it to represent where the armies were around the city, and where they were moving and when they broke into the city and so on. And it was lunacy, but it was really fun. Even if I lost my voice every day.
Yeah, I'll put the pictures we've got of our time there up on the blog to go with this podcast post.
Yeah, what we found is that there was no way, it was just simply impossible for us to reach enough people to make this worthwhile. Yeah,
people were just walking through, wouldn't stop to hear the spiel, but also the spiel, so I was there trying to sell my games. The spiel meant that I spent like 5 minutes talking to a couple of people each time, giving them the spiel about your game, and then they'd take their sticker and walk away.
Yeah, so the fact that we had board games and computer games is just we had too much going on.
Yeah, we really did.
But even so, I was pretty much running games non-stop.
You were.
I think towards the end, I stopped pushing so hard because I was so exhausted. But I was pretty much running games non-stop. And everybody we ran games for, everyone who came and sat down and played with us, had a blast.
Yeah.
And we did have people coming back from day to day. In particular, there was one boy whose father had a stall opposite us. He got really invested. He campaigned so hard for us. He came back and played every day.
He would bring people around to vote and stuff. He was great.
So yeah, people really enjoyed what we were doing. I know we were the highlight of Armageddon for multiple people. But
we're talking about 30 people.
Yeah. At most, I could reach 30 people a day.
Out of multiple thousands that come through Armageddon? Yeah.
I could not run enough games to be able to reach more than about 30 people a day, tops. And on some days, I got so exhausted that I couldn't even do that.
Yeah.
I remember you were running off to get me hot lemon toddies virtually non-stop as I'd lose my voice on the hour every hour pretty much.
Oh, it was funny.
But it was great fun. And at the end of it, despite the Silver Dragons being strongly in the lead throughout the first 3 days, on the last day, thanks to the boy who was our dedicated follower, he was campaigning for the Bronze Dragons. He pretty much single-handedly kept the Bronze Dragons in the race. And on the last day, he managed to pull off the coup and he won it for the Bronze Dragons.
Yep.
There were some other people who were pretty strongly...
Yeah.
People got really invested in their faction.
Yeah. Some people really did.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah. While we were doing that, we were also concurrently running a stream... one player thing.
Yeah.
I was your GM and you were one character in a small ensemble of characters, and that was a bit of a grand tour of big cities of Tyrania.
That was fun because I'd never actually gone to play in my own sandbox until then.
And I made it a little bit of a chosen one type story because, when you got one player,
when
you
you
might
got
as well.
one player, you can do that.
Yeah. So that's still on YouTube and it might still be on Twitch and stuff. It's called Apprentices of Tyrania if you want to check it out.
This is also where we should talk about Street Rat.
Oh, yeah. So throughout all of 2020, each month I took part in the Bitsy Jam on itch.io, and I used the Bitsy engine, which is this really cute, awesome little engine that makes 2D games, which, it has limitations, but
it's
when you...
super pixelated.
Yeah, when you... And also there's limitations
you can
in terms of...
do.
Yeah, there's limitations in terms of the mechanics, so working within the limitations is part of the challenge, really. So I told a 12-part story about what's the word for a rat face person?
Oh, one of the new races we decided to include was animal-headed people.
Yeah.
After Marco Polo has the Kainokephali, who are the dog-headed people. So we decided to put in Kainokephali and Ailurokephali, who are cat people, and Murokephali, who are mouse people.
I wonder if I just called him a Murokephali, because I'm completely blanking on the word for rat, even though I wrote a whole 12-part story about a rat-head guy.
I think it's the same word.
It might be Murokephali, yeah.
Murokephali.
So, but part of the challenge was that there was a different prompt every month. And I didn't know ahead of time what those prompts would be. So I had a vague shape of a story in my head, but I let the prompt every month dictate where I went with it, including one month where the theme was Bitsy Classic. And I was like, oh, well, God, what do I do with that? And so I made it be a reference to every Bitsy Jam theme that had happened up until that present day. That was a lot of fun. That was a fun challenge. And that's all still on itch.io if you want to have a play. It's completely free.
I know. Some of the chapters you were really busy and you just
some of them I phoned it
out.
in,
Yeah. But some of them, I know the first one I showed to lots of people and everyone loved it because it was a classic sort of puzzle. Yeah, explore this dungeon and you had to find all the things and this person wants the item and you got to go and find it and then bring it back to them. Yeah,
with insta death traps and stuff. Classic.
But it doesn't really matter because the whole game is about 5-10 minutes long.
Yeah. Yeah, some months I'd slave over it and try to get everything just right, and then some months, just because I was getting increasingly busy towards the end of the year, some months I just had to phone it in, which is a shame, but...
There also, I remember there were some bits of really amazing pixel art that you did for it. I still remember there's one later on where you meet a dragon.
Yeah, that
and
was
so
fun.
you're this tiny little pixel person, and then suddenly the entire screen is this massive animated dragon, and there's a little you at the front. And I still remember that being really impressive.
Yeah, I'm not the greatest artist, so I had to just sort of improvise and just play with the messiness that you can achieve with simple pixels. Because it's not like colorized pixel graphics. You've got, I can't remember if it's 2 or 3. I think you've got your background color, your sprite color, and your item color. So you've got 2 colors to play around with. Which for me, because I'm not a great pixel artist, was fine, because it was like outlines, that's all you're getting, nothing more. But yeah, no, I had a lot of fun.
And so this is where we started working with an artist.
Oh yeah.
So we contacted Polina Bliss, who is a local artist who I saw on Facebook, and she's been doing some of the art for us, and her stuff is amazing.
Yeah.
She's so talented.
Yeah.
And so every so often we'll commission a new piece of art for whatever we're working on.
I will put some of the art up on the blog post that goes with this podcast. So go check that out.
What's she done so far? She did the cover to the introductory guide. She's
guide.
done the posters
silver,
for the two factions, the silver and the bronze dragons.
Yeah.
And she's just done the cover for the latest book that I'm working on, which is the City Guide.
City Guide. And
the concept art is in for the next one after that.
Yeah, there's a draft sketch for the one after that.
Yeah.
We had Polina, and then we had Ryan Wong design our logo.
Oh.
With our mascot Pacino, which we fell in love with.
Yeah.
Pacino when we saw
tiny
him.
Little dragon.
Yeah. Again, check our website or our blog. You'll see him around. Is that all that we've had other people?
I think that's all that we've had so far. So
obviously, we've got playtesters in terms of having our friends sit in on this all the time.
I'm currently hard at work on writing the second book.
Sort of 2 at once, right?
One of them is really taking a backseat. I've got the one that is this is the one that I'm focusing on. During the lockdown, I managed to get the first draft completed, and then since I've been back to work has been crazy, and so progress has just stopped.
Yeah.
But so the idea is that there's all these different cities, and very early on we decided that it would be good to have one that was like a focus to be, this is the main city. I remember for ages, even though we decided it was going to be Fiumenzi, the city of the Blue Dragons, which is Florence, for ages we had no information about it. Nothing had been set there.
Reminded me, there were 2 things that fleshed out Fiumenzi for us.
Oh, the Discord.
The Discord. We briefly had a Discord roleplay going on. That was the other thing I was trying to remember.
Right.
Yeah, that was fun. We had a couple of sessions, a couple of adventures with people through Discord. It fell apart because when you are parents of a toddler,
it's hard.
Increasingly difficult to dual GM something like that.
Yeah. Anyway, so yes, we decided that Fiumenzi, our version of Florence, should be the focus for our campaign. So that if new people want to get involved and run a game themselves, there are all these other cities as well, but Fiumenzi would always be the one that got the most detail. It would be the central one. And so I've been working on a city guide for there. And again, I've been striking that problem of how much detail is too much detail, how much detail is not enough detail. I think I've got it to where I want it now.
Yeah.
Where there's quite a lot of spelt out, but there's also a lot of scope for people to put their own things in. There's no sort of block-by-block description of what's going on, which I know other city guides will have, in this building you've got this, in this building you've got that, and I've always found that very limiting.
Yeah, to me that's not particularly helpful. I'm not going to read a book like that. So I'm really looking forward to getting this one out there when it's ready to go. Especially since this time I'm not going to format it in Microsoft Word. I'm going to do it in Canva.
Yeah, at the end of the year, once I go back to my regular job and everything should start returning to normal, and so hopefully then I can start working on the second draft and getting it all sort of hammered out a bit more.
Yeah, and once Her Gentle Highness gets more and more ready, I'll have more time to actually, edit your draft.
Yeah. It's coming along, though.
Slowly. So more zines, and we actually have, years of zines planned out.
I did a plan for all the sort of mini books that I could write about this. So it's like, okay, so you've got a book for each of the 14 major cities where the dragons
Some of
rule.
which are more important than others.
Some of which are more important than others. And then there's the adventure campaigns that we've thought of for different places. Then there's the player guides and... I believe the current list is at 30-something zines. And in terms of covering the sort of the meta plot, such as it is, that's Act 1.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, a lot of the sort of setting guide stuff is evergreen. We've also decided for the books, even though we've got this sort of emergent meta plot in our home games that we'll keep developing and following through on, in the books, it's going to be very sort of timeline neutral.
Yeah.
There will probably be a book relatively early on where we spell out what's actually going on with the whole meta plot. More as like a choose your own path sort of choose your own adventure style thing rather than a this is the story that we are telling.
Yeah.
Options rather than a road. But then from that, everything is pretty much going to be set around the same date or within about a year's period. So players... we want people, if they want to use our stuff, to not get caught out by our meta plot. And so if we wind up, for example, this hasn't happened yet, if we wind up killing all the dragons in one city and liberating it, that would not get reflected in our official releases.
So we also have a whole multimedia empire planned.
We do, though, actually.
I am quite interested in writing some Tyrania tie-in fiction.
I know I've had the idea for a Tyrania novel for ages.
Yeah.
But it's just never quite been calling me enough for me to actually write it.
I think the thing that's stopping me from writing the idea that's strongest in my head is that it's smut.
It really is.
And I've never written smut before, so...
Maybe you need to just write it just to get it out of your system.
Maybe I should, yeah. But see, I don't know. On the one hand...
Sounds like the smut's been creeping into your current book a bit.
Oi, shut up. Has not. No, see, the thing is that my one problem with it, though, is smut sells, but is the audience we're bringing in the one that we want? I don't know.
Yeah, in the Venn diagram overlap is low fantasy historical realism and smut. Does that really have that much of an overlap?
To be fair, when you were a kid, you read smutty historical fiction.
That's true. It was Jean Plaidy, so it's the sort of smut where it faded to black.
Yeah.
Every single time something was going on.
Yeah.
And I remember just being kind of oblivious and not really caring every time it started talking about boudoirs.
But on a more serious note, the actual multimedia thing I've got planned is I have a few ideas for video games to make for this. At least one of which is well within my sort of technological grasp as a solo dev. I've talked about this on the podcast already. I really want to make Dragons of Tyrania, Demon Summoner. I don't know if that's the actual title, but basically it's imagine a hipster NB university student drunk dialing demons. And imagine that character making a Faustian pact and
or multiple Faustian pacts.
Yeah, making a series of Faustian pacts in order to trump the original Faustian
I'm
pact.
kind of now imagining it being The Hangover.
It's like The Hangover. Yeah.
Except instead of being like, whoa, where's the thing gone?
It's, oh damn, I sold my soul.
Where's my soul gone?
I sold my soul and now I've got to make a series of bargains to try and get it back before time is up. So that I want to make that, and that's a visual novel right there.
Yeah.
So that's easy enough for me to make. I just need some time.
Story of our lives.
Yeah.
As we've said, I've got 30-something zines that I want to do. So at the moment, I'm working on the Fiumense City Guide, which is our main city. After this one, the next one was a convention adventure, except the convention got cancelled because of COVID.
Bloody COVID.
And then I was going to take it to a different convention, which then got cancelled.
Bloody COVID.
And then I was actually going to go to another convention, which got cancelled. It's been a bad year for conventions. But anyway, this is a Weekend at Bernie's style adventure, which some of our listeners might have played already and playtested, where the lord of a city dies just as the armies are marching in on their borders, and his advisors and courtiers have to try and cover up his death.
They have to Weekend at Bernie's him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
While also discovering that
Things are not as
their
they
dragon
seem.
prince was in fact never a dragon.
Oh dear.
And that the family had just been pulling a long con. And none of them know how the con was being pulled.
Yeah.
And so you've got to figure out how they were pretending to be dragons and keep the ruse going while trying to figure out how to save the city or just save your own skins.
It's another one of those ones which is great exploration of morality.
We had a lot of fun doing a couple of playtests. I saw a few places where I feel like I need to strengthen it up, but it's really funny.
Yeah.
And then after that, the next ones I want to work on are the player's guide. So all the nice crunchy rules options, which would also have a little bit more detail about how all the different traditional races, inverted commas, in Tyrania, they're all humans except for a couple of
Edge cases.
gnomes.
Yeah.
So rules for our versions of gnomes and dwarves and goblins and elves and what have you, and all the different subclasses that are unique to us, and all that sort of thing.
Sick paladins.
Yeah. Oh, what subclass idea am I most excited for? Probably the Warlock.
Yeah. Is this still the Plague Warlock we're talking about?
No, the Little Spirits Warlock.
Oh.
The Warlock who, instead of making a pact with a big devil, makes a whole lot of little pacts with, like, imps.
That's
and,
right.
The Lantern Archons.
The goblin ethic Warlock.
Yeah, crowdsourcing your Warlock pact rather than having a single big monolithic patron.
Yeah.
I
love it.
There are some other really cool ideas that we've had. The Numerology Wizard, the Zodiac Sorcerer.
Yeah. Super cool.
All sorts of cool things, really. And then the other idea that I've had that I think is really cool and really could be revolutionary for all of D&D, actually, is a learn-to-play adventure. A learn-to-play solo adventure.
Yeah.
So this is stealing from something that Chaosium, who I think I've repeatedly said are my favourite publishing company at the moment. Chaosium, in their starter box sets for Call of Cthulhu and RuneQuest, have these pick-a-path adventures which give you a really engaging pick-a-path adventure while teaching you the rules of the game as you go. And D&D doesn't really have something like that, so I think that's something we could work on.
Totally.
While doing a really big, cool Tyrania story at the same time. And in fact, the more I think about that idea, the more I think it's not going to be one, it might be like a whole series of these game books. And hey, as somebody who grew up on Lone Wolf and Fighting Fantasy, that's a pretty big, life goal right there.
Yeah, game books are lit, and also, game books are very easily converted into visual novels, or even just interactive website native browser stuff.
And apart from that, I've always wanted to do some sort of board game or card game or something based around Tyrania, because the whole idea of here are factions and they could fight each other militarily or politically or artistically or economically or so on is such a setup for a collectible card game.
Yeah. There's some wonderful themes in Tyrania. We've touched on the moral relativism. We haven't touched too much on the religious aspects, which I really enjoy. Having grown up Catholic and having studied art history, I know a bit about, especially in the art, the religious iconography. So this, to me, it feels a little bit more grounded in earthly religions than your typical D&D setting, which is just sort of hand-wavy, there are gods.
There are gods. Everybody knows there are gods. But unless they're trying to destroy the world, no one really worships them or anything.
No.
And so this is a world where we're encouraging people to come up with their own saints. There is going to be very light, mild mechanics around getting inspiration and from religious inspiration, because that's just such an important thing for people's lives at the time. There's also a world where, unlike in a traditional world, the nature of the supernatural is unknown, which is something that I've really enjoyed. Nobody knows what's up with God.
Yeah.
They all agree there is one. Probably. Everybody believes there is one, but nobody knows any concrete facts.
And the angels and the demons and the war between them has something to do with God. Probably.
But they're not really talking about it.
No.
And it's a relatively low magic setting, so your average person on the street will never have seen this stuff. And so magic is miraculous and terrifying and inexplicable, which is something that I think is really cool that D&D especially is lacking.
Totally, yeah.
Magic is
mundane.
Magical and unique.
Yeah.
Another thing we've added a whole new magic system, which I had some ideas for the other day and I forgot to write down, and hopefully they come back. A whole new magic system, which is a little bit more fairy tale, where people can do really amazing things that's tied to artistry and creation and inspiration, rather than spell slots and mechanics and levels, which is great for gameplay balance, but not great for storytelling balance. Yeah, and it also means that the average person doesn't know what a druid or a wizard or a warlock is. They just go, it's magic! I can't describe what that is, I don't know.
Burn the witch.
Burn the witch.
Although, yeah, they're not too burny of witches, really.
They're not really.
Yeah.
Oh, another thing that I really like, actually, is an attempt to have a bit more economic realism. Where you are... Generally, you're not going to be trying to get hundreds and thousands of gold pieces. Your average wage is going to be, what's it like, a gold a piece a day?
Yeah.
That's the average wage for a mercenary. It's pretty dirty work. So that's something else that I really enjoy. Of course, since all of this, we've had a few problems. First one is that The Dragon Prince, the Netflix series, came out, so we had to change our name from Dragon Princes to Dragons of Tyrania. And then this year, an Italian company launched Brancalonia, which is a 5th edition medieval Italian, they call it spaghetti fantasy. So it's a little bit sillier and a little bit more roguish and, than what I'm doing. And it's achieved a lot of recognition and it's won some awards. And so that does kind of overshadow what I'm doing, but, well, that's how it is, you know?
Yeah, it is what it is.
It is what it is. And I don't want to look into Brancalonia because I've got my own thing that I'm doing, but at the same time, everything I've heard sounds awesome. Yeah, power to them. It sounds like they put out something really amazing and cool.
Yeah.
So what else is there to say about Tyrania at this time?
You'll see it when you see it, basically.
Yeah, because I've got a job and because I've got a toddler.
Yeah, you'll see it when you see it.
Yeah, and you've got a job and you've got your own creative projects and you've got a toddler.
Yeah.
You'll see it when you see it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if you're one of our close personal friends, then you probably get to see more of it than other people do.
Yeah.
You know, feel free to ask for a game.
Hopefully,
friends.
by the end of this year, I will have wrapped up Ruins of Aromia, which will determine another major plot point and who exactly one of the big bads is going to be for the campaign going forward, and what sort of supernatural influence you're going to get from this fantasy version of Rome that we've got going. It looks like it's going to be a fairy city, but like little fairies rather than big, all-powerful Titania and Oberon style fairies.
Interesting.
More like satyrs and centaurs and dryads and that sort of thing. Pixies and yeah. I sort of wanted the ghosts to win, but there you have it. As for which of the big bads from the campaign get brought down low and which ones manage to achieve their goals and move on to become like setting-wide big bads, we'll find out because we've got 2 fights left in the entire campaign.
How's that Dracolich looking?
They've just been told that he's the big boss and they're all very, very frightened.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, one fight is them versus some hench fairies where they get to stretch their muscles and beat up some people, and then there's the giant superpowered gold Dracolich versus fairy wannabe god versus all of them throw down to decide who's going to get to rule the city. And
yeah.
It's going to be fun. And I look forward to, once that's done, maybe having a little bit of a break from running games in their world for a little bit. But honestly, probably knowing me, knowing the amount of game ideas that I've got for this world, probably not that long.
Yeah. Well, if you want to know more, you can follow our blog where we occasionally will post about Dragons of Tyrania.
I don't post on it as much anymore. It's
I
kind
mirror
of...
post your posts to our main blog.
Yeah. It's kind of done its function, which was to act as my big brainstorming place while I was coming up with new ideas.
But the blog, the Skybay Games blog, is also the place to find out about any updates to our progress, such as when our next publication might be out. Good idea to follow that, or to even join our newsletter where, and you can hit me up if you want to do some playtesting. If you're not one of our close personal friends and you live somewhere completely different in the world, maybe, you want to get some early access, do some playtesting for us. We'd be totally fine with that. You'd get a credit in the book and a free PDF. Maybe we could shell out to send a paper copy. I don't know.
I know, international postage being one of those.
Yeah.
We're not really the sort of business that, makes money. That's not really our sort of operation.
No, not really.
We've deliberately not gone that much into detail about the lore of the setting in this video. This is more about the ideas behind it and the development. If you are interested in the lore and the world building or any particular aspect of it, or you want more details about anything, then feel free to ask us. We could always do a follow-up video if this one winds up being successful, going into more detail about things.
Totally.
Or we could do an AMA or something like that,
yeah,
where people can really ask us questions about the world. I know a popular thing that people do online is the one where it's, ask me anything about my world. Either I'll know the answer, or I'll make something up and then I'll know more.
Yeah.
So you could always do one of those.
Cool.
And apart from that, I keep being tempted to make a Dragons of Tyrania cube for Magic the Gathering, which is a terrible, terrible idea that would take too much time and effort to do right. And yet. Anyway, that's us.
Yep.
So, thanks for listening, everyone. Next time we'll be back with more Planescape.
Oh, sweet. Awesome.
But until then, we're signing out.
Bye.
Keep gaming.